Hello, this is Nick from PlanetReport.net. I thought I'd do a bit of an update regarding Cape Town and the drought that they've been having and the low amount of water that was left in the reservoirs. If you remember, a few weeks ago there was talk of day zero being in April, and day zero was when literally the city would have no more fresh water to use, which would obviously be a disaster. But since then things have improved slightly, and it's some good news, because I thought I'd do a bit of an update, and I was looking, and the day zero prediction now has been pushed back. It was originally the April the 12th a few weeks ago, but because the city's been saving water and there's been some rainfall as well, a bit of rain, and so now it is currently predicted to be July the 9th, which is a lot better, and it also takes it through to the rainy part of the year, because July in Cape Town is like the winter period, so they get a lot more rain in July and August than what they do in February. So it should only get better, as the months go towards July. So they hopefully have dodged the terrible predicament that they were facing. But and I think also, I did read that I think some farmers have added to the capacity, because obviously the irrigation needs for the farms are probably lower at this time of year now, because it's probably their autumn coming, so they won't have as much need for the water for the farms for grapes and fruit and things like that. So, but I've got the current water levels for the city's dams, and so when I last made the video, I think it was the 6th of February, the overall capacity for the dams for the Western Cape was 25.8%, and so now on the 23rd of February the overall capacity is standing at 24.1% full. So it's only a very small decline in a month. So it's almost sort of stabilised really. The biggest dam, the Waterskloof Dam, was 12.9% full on the it was the 2nd of February. So on the 2nd of February it was 12.9% full, 23rd February 10.9% full, so it's gone down by 2%. That is the biggest dam that provides the water for the Cape Town. I think it provides about 50% of the city's water comes from that dam, and that has gone down by 2%. So so that's the current situation. But it's still, hopefully it'll rain well over the winter. If it doesn't, and it doesn't replenish the dam, it's got a lot, if it's only like the Waterskloof Dam's only going to be, if it continues like this for like another month or two, it's going to be like 8-7% full, but it's going to rain more probably as the months go by. So let's say it stays steady at 10.9%, then you've only got a few months of winter before the spring comes later in the year, and then it's going to be less rainfall again. So it's going to maybe take a few years of heavy rain in the winter to get it up to a reasonable level. And also the BBC had a article about 10 other cities that could run dry or have water shortages in the future, and in the last video I did mention about London. And most people think of Britain as being like really rainy, like a rainy country, but it's actually the east coast of the UK is really quite dry, and London in particular, it actually gets less rainfall than Cape Town. It's got double the population of Cape Town, it's about 8 million people, and it gets less rainfall than Rome and Paris and other places in Europe. It's a very, very dry city actually, and that was one of the cities listed. Of course the rest of the UK is quite rainy, like the west coast and like Wales, and that part of the country is a lot rainier, and it gets more precipitation. So really it's a case of organising to ensure that the reservoirs from that part of the country can reach through to London, so that if London ever has lower rainfall for a couple of years, they shouldn't have a problem of getting rain from other parts of the country, whereas Cape Town, where they are, it's the whole area is dry, so it's a sort of greater problem there. But I'm going to go through some of the other cities. I'll just mention them. Sao Paulo in Brazil is one of them, and apparently they had a very similar problem to Cape Town in 2015, and their main reservoir fell below 4% capacity, and at the height of the crisis, the city of over 21 million people had less than 20 days of water supply, and police were having to escort water trucks to stop looting. So they've got a big water problem, and they've got a very big population for that city as well, huge. And the UN apparently said that they criticised the lack of proper planning and investment in the water supply, because that is it's lack of rainfall, but it can also be lack of planning, and lack of infrastructure. So that is very important to get that right. Another place that could face water shortages is Bangalore in India. It's got some terrible old sewers and water systems that are struggling to cope. And another thing is pollution's quite bad. So it said that 85% of lakes had only water that could be used for irrigation and industrial cooling, and they weren't suitable for drinking or bathing. Another place is Beijing in China. It's got 20 million people, and China's it's got 20% of the world's population, but it's only got 7% of the world's fresh water. And there's a pollution problem. It says in 2015, 40% of Beijing's surface water was polluted to the point of not being useful even for agriculture or industrial use, which is pretty terrible. And then Cairo in Egypt. 97% of Egypt's water comes from the river Nile, but it's increasingly being polluted with agricultural and residential waste. And the UN's estimate is that it could have critical shortages by 2025. Jakarta in Indonesia, 10 million people, and apparently illegal digging of wells is rife, and it's draining the underground aquifers. And as a consequence, about 40% of Jakarta now lies below sea level, according to World Bank estimates. And the aquifers are not being replenished because of concrete and asphalt means the open fields cannot absorb rainfall. That open fields cannot absorb the rainfall because it's just too much concrete everywhere. Moscow in Russia, it says it's got problems from the industrial legacy from the Soviet era. Moscow's water supply is 70% dependent on surface water. And it says official regulatory bodies admit that 35 to 60% of total drinking water in Russia do not meet sanitary standards. Istanbul, Turkey, it's in a situation of water stress, and it says local experts have warned the situation could worsen to water scarcity by 2030. And Istanbul has started, it's got 14 million people, and it started experiencing shortages in drier months of the year. In 2014, reservoir levels were down to 30% of capacity. Mexico City in Mexico, it's got 21 million people, and 1 in 5 just get a few hours from their taps a week, and another 20% of running water for just part of the day. And 40% of its water comes from far off sources, and it's got no operation for recycling wastewater, and it's got really leaky water pipes. Estimated 40% of water is lost through the pipe network. And then, as I mentioned, London is one of the places that's listed. It says the Greater London Authority says the city is pushing close to capacity and is likely to have supply problems by 2025 and serious shortages by 2040. And I know that the London population has increased through immigration by about 1 million people in the last 10 years. So the population's increased quite dramatically. And then Tokyo is another place in Japan. It says the water needs to be collected as a drier than expected rainy season could lead to a drought. And it's got 30 million people, so it's got a massive demand for water in the city. And it relies on 70% of its water system relies on surface water. It's like from reservoirs rather than from underground sources. And on a positive note, recent investment means that they're aiming to reduce water leakage in the pipe network to only 3%, which is really low. And then Miami in Florida, USA, is the other city, and it's got a crisis because the Atlantic Ocean can contaminate the Biscayne aquifer, the city's main fresh water source. And it says the problem was detected in the 1930s, but seawater still leaks in, and because of sea level rises, with water breaching underground defence barriers installed in recent decades. So the seawater is like sort of seeping, or can potentially seep into the freshwater supply, which obviously renders it useless. It says neighbouring cities are already struggling. Hallandane Beach, which is a few miles north of Miami, had 6 of its 8 wells closed due to saltwater intrusion. So water everywhere, not a drop to drink, as the saying goes. I think that's it for now. Thanks for listening. If you would like more videos like this, please do subscribe to this channel about wildlife, environment, and all sorts of topics like that. Earthquakes, I've just done the latest earthquake report yesterday, so if you want to have a listen to that, it's in the latest videos. Okay, bye bye.